to Europe. And European leaders, without any pretense or reservations, openly declare their intention to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, subordinating to this their domestic and foreign policy, as well as the economy of the entire European Union. Peace in Ukraine, its future, was barely mentioned in their speeches. Against this backdrop, Zelensky's hysterical speeches in Munich were unsurprising. Funds for continuing the war are still being allocated, though in smaller amounts. They promise and supply weapons. But does this not mean that he is slowly being written off? Europe, it seems, will guarantee Ukraine's security only as long as the Kiev regime remains Russia's foe and keeps fighting. Zelensky doesn't need peace. He stated this directly in Munich. For him, the war is a political question, and simply one of survival. Mr. Chairman, Western countries, primarily European, have played a very disgraceful role since the very beginning of the Ukrainian crisis. These days we are commemorating another anniversary of the state coup in Kiev. I must remind you that it was precisely the Europeans, in the years 2013 and 2014, who undertook an unprecedented interference in the domestic affairs of Ukraine, which ultimately led to the UNKI, to the unconstitutional removal from power of the legally elected president of Ukraine. It was the Europeans who present themselves as the primary democratic lawmakers, the very sources of moral standards for all the rest of the world, which they label as not always civilized and more often completely authoritarian, who brought to power in Ukraine a bloodthirsty neo-Nazi-style regime. They gave him carte blanche for any crimes, effectively encouraging his aim to destroy the Russian-speaking population. Throughout all these years, Western sponsors haven't uttered a single word of condemnation. Blood-chilling attacks on civilians, first in Donbass and then in other Russian regions. Since then, unprovoked Russian aggression against Ukraine has been placed at the very center of Western arguments. Anyone who tries to tell the truth about the lawlessness in Donbass or the current strikes on civilian targets and residents of Russian regions, about the bloody Kursk operation, and especially to provide evidence that the conflict was unleashed and provoked specifically by NATO, is immediately labeled pro-Russian propagandists. And they silence their voices. In Ukraine, such individuals are driven out of the country, thrown into prisons, and simply murdered. I address my European colleagues. Who are you trying to deceive? Despite the facts and common sense, all these years you've been molding Zelensky into a hero, parading peaceful aspirations he never had. At the same time, you falsely attribute to Russia a lack of interest in peace and a clear focus on escalation. Any attempts by European leaders to convince the world of their commitment to the cause of achieving lasting peace, a genuine peace in Ukraine, are consistently shattered by the facts. Today, on February 24th, the Press Bureau of the Russian Federation's Foreign Intelligence Service released an urgent statement concerning the intentions of London and Paris to provide Kiev with nuclear weaponry, or what is referred to as a dirty bomb, as well as the means for its delivery. In concrete terms, we are talking about the covert transfer to Ukraine of relevant European components, equipment and technologies. As an option, the French ignoble compact TN-75 warhead from the M51.1 submarine-launched ballistic missile is being considered. It is quite telling that other Western capitals, it seems, are perfectly aware of the full extent of London's and Paris's recklessness. Berlin, for example, declined to participate in this endeavor. I presume there's no need to remind anyone that such undertakings are not merely irresponsible and perilous, but also unlawful, as they represent a direct infringement of the first article of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. It is for this very reason that the perpetrators of this dangerous undertaking are striving to present the obtaining of nuclear weaponry by Kiev as being solely the product of the Ukrainians' own efforts. This development of events clearly demonstrates that British and French leaders who have been sidelined from the settlement process concerning the Ukrainian situation have definitively lost all connection with reality. Russia possesses indeed all the capabilities to repel such actions. However, we hope that in London and Paris there are still enough sensible and reasonable people who can restrain their leaders from such inappropriate steps. Ukrainians and their European sponsors have a long and extensive record of treachery and hypocrisy, beginning with the deliberate sabotage of the Minsk agreements, which, as subsequently admitted by various European leaders, served no other purpose than to gain valuable time for the rearmament of the AFU. Just as Security Council Resolution 222 was a dead letter to them, so last year's document 2774 does not serve their interests. The leaders of most European countries, as we see, consider themselves above Security Council resolutions, principles, and norms of international law. The vote that took place this morning in the General Assembly on the resolution, which was prepared by Kiev and various European countries, titled "In Support of Lasting Peace in Ukraine," is nothing more than just another manipulation, an attempt to throw dust in the eyes of representatives of the global South. It bears absolutely no relation to reality or to a sustainable resolution of the conflict.
To play a constructive role in the early political resolution of the crisis. Mr. Chairman, just now the US representative in his statement once again slandered and smeared China. This is completely unacceptable. China is not Ukraine's. China is not the creator of the Ukraine crisis, nor is it a party to it. China's position on the Ukraine issue has always been open and consistent. That is to call for a ceasefire and an end to the fighting and to steadfastly promote peace and encourage negotiations. China's efforts are evident to the international community. We have not provided lethal weapons to any party in the conflict and have always strictly controlled the export of dual-use items. As one of the world's most important major producing, trading, and consuming nations, China, along with Russia, Ukraine, Europe, and the United States, I must also emphasize that for quite some time now, the United States has been exploiting various opportunities, fabricating all sorts of pretexts and falsehood to persistently attack and discredit China. This is nothing less than blatant political manipulation, and its true objective is to incite bloc confrontation and create division and antagonism.
We once again urge the United States.
China remains the decisive enabler of Russia's war industrial machine. We have repeatedly urged China, many times in this chamber, to stop supplying Russia with dual-use goods and critical material components that ultimately end up in the drones and other weapons being used in Ukraine. China also remains one of the top importers of Russian oil. If China genuinely desires peace, it must immediately halt the export of dual-use goods and cease purchasing Russian oil. The DPRK has transferred munitions and ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine, and since October 2024 has deployed thousands of DPRK troops to fight for Russia on the front lines. Most urgently, we once again call on both parties to stay at the negotiating table and, in a spirit of flexibility, compromise, and a duty to protect and preserve the lives of their own citizens, to end this barbaric war once and for all.
The neutral members of this council have declared that the allegation made by the representative of the Russian Federation is an outright lie. He says that we have lost touch with reality. It is he who has truly lost touch with reality. This is yet another piece of disinformation coming from the Russian Federation, and a very clear attempt to deflect attention from its ongoing, unprovoked, and illegal invasion of Ukraine. I can categorically assure members of this Council that the United Kingdom remains fully committed to its obligations under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and to preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We are not providing and would not provide nuclear weapons or related capabilities to Ukraine.